My name is Guanxi. I'm a China business coach, trainer, and advisor, but more importantly, I'm an ABC. That's American-born Chinese. You may come back to Shanghai and almost not recognize what had changed, because that's how fast China was changing and evolving. At the intersection between America and China, I'm concerned about the lack of cultural awareness on both sides. So I started having conversations with my unborn son. I want to try to explain our world in context in order for him to make better sense of his world. And I want him to develop a healthier attitude, mindset, and approach towards anyone from a different culture. The attitudes of the people continue to evolve too. Welcome to Season 2 of Generational ABC Podcast, another series of conversations between me and my unborn son, one ABC to another. That has changed dramatically today. I would almost say that some Americans in China might want to keep a low profile these days because the attitudes have changed so much. Hey, little buddy, it's your father again. This is actually the second recording of this day, but I just realized something. I realized something that's not only important for this podcast, but it's just important when you're communicating with anybody in general, is I started off in the previous podcast sharing kind of like, a life-changing, defining moment in my life, which was when I was picked up out of school and dropped in the school system in Taiwan for an entire year. But I didn't provide any context why it was a life-changing event and kind of what happened afterwards. So I just was swimming and I was just thinking about that. So I wanted to record this while the thoughts are still fresh in my head. So what I remember, so I'm not going to talk about the time I spent in Taiwan. I'm going to talk about coming back to America. And I can remember driving back to our old neighborhood where we lived. And I wanted to, it's kind of like we were driving up, and before we made the turn into and we lived in a dead-end street. That means there's not a lot of traffic on that street. So the kids basically just played in the street because it was a dead end on one side and there was a swimming pool on the other side, the community pool. So I wanted to surprise my kind of the two friends that I had that were neighbors. Their names were Stephen and Eric. And so I got dropped off before and I kind of started running towards the house. And this is after an entire year of living abroad. And sure enough, I can still remember Stephen and Eric were there. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but it just seems like back in that period, things didn't really change. And people didn't expect things to change because I just came back to exactly where I left off 1 year ago. And the two people that I hung out with the most were still there hanging out. So it just puts a really big contrast kind of on what we experience today. And I can remember reading a stat. I don't know if this stat is true or not, but this was a stat that probably came out around maybe five years ago to maybe 8 years ago, where somebody had determined that a new high-rise construction or a new building is built in Shanghai kind of like every 18 hours. And that's how quickly Shanghai was changing. People who lived in Shanghai and then left Shanghai, they would say that if you left Shanghai for 3 months or 6 months, you may come back to Shanghai and almost not recognize what had changed, because that's how fast China was changing and evolving. And I'm just thinking that I left Shanghai in 2017, and for me to go back now, 2 years later, it would be completely, well, it would be probably, there would be many parts of Shanghai that would be unrecognizable. And it's not only that the buildings and the streets and the roads may have changed, but the thing that's important is the attitudes of the people continue to evolve too. So back when I first started traveling to China, in mainland China, in 2004, there was a certain feeling if you said, well, I'm an American. Even though I looked ethnically Chinese, there was a certain attitude towards Americans, and it was generally very positive. Chinese people wanted a lot of foreigners in China, and the country that they knew the most about through movies and TV and Olympics is America. So, it was almost like it was a badge of honor to walk around China in 2004 and be able to say, I'm an American. Well, that has changed dramatically today. I would almost say that some Americans in China might want to keep a low profile these days because the attitudes have changed so much. And that's just one of the things that in the moment, a lot of people lack that type of awareness. You may think you know everything about China because you lived and worked there for a couple years, and then you come back and you don't realize that the attitudes towards many things have changed. The attitudes towards foreigners have changed, and that's kind of like it improves and then it gets worse, and it improves and it gets worse. And it's just this cycle, and it depends on what's going on in the world. It depends on what the media or the local media in China is broadcasting, and kind of what the government wants the population to generally feel. So there's a tremendous amount of influence that China can have, or the Chinese government can have, on the perceptions of their citizens. I don't know if that's a good thing or if that's a bad thing, but it's just the way it is. So a lot of times we as foreigners, we're exposed to a completely different set of, I won't say facts, but facts in context. We're exposed to commentators, and they give a completely different take on the same set of events. So that shapes our mindset and our ideology and how we perceive certain events, and that could just be dramatically different from somebody from China. And sometimes that is the source of a lot of contentious discussions. So getting back to when I came back, and of course now I was going straight into the 4th grade, there doesn't really seem to be any kind of, I need to get reacclimated to speaking English and being in this environment versus the environment versus Taiwan. And everything just seemed natural. So if I think of that kind of as a defining moment in my life, it probably helped shape the fact that I am more able today to be empathetic for people who don't share the same set of values as I do. In fact, I had no idea what I was going to say on this episode. It just kind of started off with, I didn't really finish my thought on the last recording, and I kind of wanted to complete it. So why was me going to Taiwan for a year of elementary school in the late 70s a defining moment in my life? Now, if I had ended up becoming a professional baseball player, then that probably wouldn't have been a defining moment. But because I now try to help people at the intersection of culture and business between Americans and Chinese, then that type of experience does become a defining moment. So so you're gonna have yours, and it's always just good to kind of remember what these defining moments are as you go through them, and try to project kind of into the future how they can help you and the person that you ultimately want to be. All right. So so 2 episodes today that were actually recorded, but a lot of stuff going on. So in case I missed the day, we'll keep up with doing on average 1 message to you a day. All right. Love you, little buddy. Talk to you soon. Listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts,